Hello and welcome to this live Q&A. I'm Kasia Broska and I'm a Senior Digital Marketing Manager at Cambridge University Press. I hope that you've been enjoying our digital day so far with all the tips, videos and polls that we've been sharing with you on social media. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's my pleasure to introduce Rebecca Rios, who will be facilitating this session. You may recognize Rebecca from our Learn English with Cambridge YouTube channel. Apart from being a great presenter there, she's also an English language teacher with 14 years of experience and a deep-rooted interest in educational technology. So without further ado, I'll now hand over to Rebecca to introduce our panel of digital experts. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Kasia. Thank you so much for the invitation. I've been having a great time on Digital Day, as I hope our viewers have been as well. And joining me today on our panel are Delia Kidd, Senior ELT Research Manager at Cambridge University Press. She manages research projects relating to digital learning and teaching. Has a background in editorial for primary and secondary materials, as well as several years as a primary and EFL teacher, and materials developer in multiple countries, including South Africa, South Korea, Italy, and the UK. Welcome, Delia. Great to have you here.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Also here is Raquel Ribeiro, an EdTech expert, Google innovator, and English language teacher. Raquel is a tech-savvy educator, passionate about motivating students to go beyond their limits and trust their learning potential. She's one of the authors of the Teachers Editions 1 and 2 of CUP Evolve series. She blogs about apps and tech for ELT teachers in the world of better learning. Hello, Raquel. Thanks for being here today.
Hello, everyone. Good to be here.
And last but not least is Hayo Reinders, a TESOL professor and director of the doctoral program at Anaheim University and professor of applied linguistics at KMUTT in Thailand. He is founder of the Institute for Teacher Leadership and editor of Innovation in Language Learning and Teaching. Hi, Hayo. Welcome.
Hi there, Rebecca. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today. So we would also like to know where you are watching us from. So you can introduce yourself in the comments and tell us where you are from today. So the Q&A is part of the Digital Day organized by Cambridge University Press, ELT. And it focuses on discussing questions around digital learning and approaches to educational technology. Our social media fans had a chance to submit their questions in advance. And if you haven't gotten your question to us yet, don't worry. There will be an opportunity to ask them throughout this session. You can just pop your question in the live chat and we'll do our best to answer it. So now let's go to our questions. We're going to start, as I mentioned, with the questions that were sent before, but you can send your questions through the chat box right now. So my first question is going to go to Raquel, and it's from Lavinia Haddad, and she asks, how can we combine the use of course books with digital tools, such as Google Slides, Jamboard, and Padlet, for example?
Hi, thanks for the question, Lavinia, and this is a very important one. We need to have like three parallel tools while remote teaching. So of course, there's the platform for the synchronous teaching. There's the course book, because remember, before the pandemic, we were using the course books, and this is material students have got. And it's necessary, my point of view, from the daily practice of teaching synchronously to my students every day, to have a support, a parallel platform for support. So there are some examples here like Jamboard or Padlet or Google Slides. I'm also gonna add like Google Classroom, for example. You need to choose one. because if you share like too many tools, it's overwhelming. Our learners have different levels of digital literacy. And it's not about using a number of tools, but applying the tools so that we can share and learning can happen the most comfortable possible way. Also catering for our students, the ones who are attending the class synchronously and the ones who are not able to join, and we'll check up on the content later. So what I recommend, I personally believe that, for instance, Padlet or Google Classroom are much easier to use because, for instance, you can send a photo or a file from the book and refer to the page instructions, so it can be useful during the class for the communicative activities, because that's our main purpose when we are teaching. So we have some sort of reference to our learners. But we also think, because we are teachers, we are also worried about students who cannot join because of connectivity issues. Like I was teaching 3 hours ago, and there was this student who couldn't join because he was having serious connectivity issues, but he was on the support having, for instance, Google Classroom, the one I use. Jamboard is amazing, but I think of Jamboard as digital post-its. And it's really great for more dynamic activities. But I would say that for entertainment in the sense of conversation or challenges, and Google Slides as well. But I do think we need to have something simpler. I would also add Google Docs here because it's like a digital blank page, so that there is a reference that you keep on using throughout the classes. Yeah, so that's my take. That's what I have been doing. So we have the support.
That's great. There's so many things. Sometimes we feel a little bit, even us teachers feel overwhelmed by what we can use. So that's a good tip, just to focus on one that's going to be more effective, right? And now my next question is for Delia, and it's from Paola Sanchez. And she says, how can we engage in speaking activities in pairs without breakout rooms option?
Thanks, Paula, for the question. So that's it's a tricky one sometimes when we're thinking about speaking in synchronous settings. I know it's been one of the challenging areas for teachers to really kind of replicate as they've shifted their classrooms from classroom-based to online. And certainly breakout rooms are helpful. Of course, you can use it with things like Zoom. I think Microsoft Teams has breakout room functionality now as well. But obviously there are drawbacks, and if you can't access those tools, then you need to kind of look for alternatives. Some of the drawbacks with breakout rooms is obviously you're not there to see what's actually happening. And I know particularly with younger learners and so on, that can kind of go off the rails a little bit. So that's one of the issues. So what you could do perhaps then in that case is try and replicate the classroom situation by doing it as a whole group. So if you've got your whole class together online on whatever platform you're using, even if it's something like this, or if you're using Google Classroom or so on, get students to do pair work whilst part of a whole class. And there are benefits to that in that the other learners are also witnessing and listening to that group pair work. They're learning from their peers. They're hearing examples of how they're answering the questions. Obviously, there might be some disadvantages too. Perhaps learners might get a bit bored. If there are lots of learners in the classroom, you have to get through lots of pairs of learners. So perhaps you could kind of split it up. So on one day you have 5 sets of pairs, and the next day another 5 sets of pairs. Another option perhaps would be to get learners to do it as their kind of homework, they're outside of the classroom time. So for example, they could you could set them up as pairs on WhatsApp and get them to kind of WhatsApp call each other. But the important thing with that is that you want to give them some kind of resolution or some kind of thing to achieve, so that you know that they've kind of been on task and they've done what you've asked them to do. And with that, you could even ask them to record themselves, record the conversation, and then play that back to the teacher as well. So there's a few options there, but yeah, lots of speaking tools out there at the moment. But it is important to try and keep learners speaking as much as possible whilst they're in this lockdown situation.
That's great, great tips. And speaking of homework, here's a question for Hayo. Is it okay to assign homework to students? And if it is, how often can we do this? And what kind of homework can we assign students?
Well, yes, it is a good idea to assign homework. I don't think maybe many of your students would agree with that, but I think especially at the moment, I mean, Raquel's already talked about the importance of having some kind of structure. And so I think especially at a time when learners are naturally, a bit confused and having to figure out new ways of learning, having kind of clear guidelines and guidance. And as Delia said, some kind of activity where there's some sort of resolution, either when working at home or when taking back what they've done to the classroom, is, I think, even more valuable than it was before. Of course, there's also another point, which is purely pedagogical. We know that the strongest classrooms are those where there is a very clear connection between what learners do inside the classroom and what they do in their personal lives. And at the moment, those two are, for better or for worse, more connected than ever. And so having some kind of structured activity that allows students to connect these two so that they don't see what's happening in the confusing world at the moment and the classroom as two separate parts of their lives, but as actually a safe space where they can come back to, is very helpful. So I would say, yeah, use the homework as a way to create and strengthen those connections as much as possible.
That's great. It needs to have like a goal, or it needs to be something that they understand why they're doing it and have some kind of resolution at the end. Great. All right, and now a question about interactive activities. This one is for Raquel. So how can I plan interactive activities that students can practice on a live session? And the person put for 30 students.
Okay, so thanks for this question. It's really important. I believe most of us teachers watching here teach groups around 20 or, like mentioned here, 30 students. And we need to consider that in ELT, the most important thing during classes, for the nature of our classes, is to have those students talking and communicating with each other. So I believe from experience that the first thing is to make sure that the instructions are clear. So it's important, and I do that as I speak. I type in the chart, like with a first, second, third, so everybody can keep track of the steps. So I'm speaking and I'm also typing. If things are really, really in a hurry, you can type those steps before in a Google Docs and then you copy paste. It's much easier. It helps you in this sense. I also share those instructions in Google Classroom for the latecomers. And it's important before you actually distribute the learners, assign them to breakout rooms, that because it is, we're talking about big groups here, to have roles assigned. So for instance, if let's suppose it's a conversation, so based on an article or maybe a very short video in Instagram TV, it's a tip here. There are short videos from trustworthy media that can be great for vocabulary dictation conversation. So there's a support material that I share both, for instance, in a Google Docs or in a classroom or in any WhatsApp, whatever means you are using to communicate with your group of students. And it's really important that you agree on that. There is no right or wrong for the, let's say, the parallel platform. So you agree on that and distribute roles to your learners. So let's suppose each group is going to have 6 students. So one of them, for instance, is going to read this topic and maybe another topic. This is one idea. Somebody should be in charge of the dictionary to check words. Somebody should be in charge of sharing the screen. Somebody else is going to start and give them the possibility. Look, the first thing you do is decide on the order. So the first thing is instructions should be clear, both in the chat and in the parallel platform you choose for communication. I recommend you have some sort of support material, such as a very, very short video or something to read or a commercial. It all depends on the topic. Assign roles to the learners. And once they get into the breakout room, use the broadcast message to reinforce the first and second steps and flash those instructions like twice or 3 times so that everybody, or at least most people in the group, get to see it. And then you go along visiting the groups and trust the learners' ability and possibility to help each other, even if they are like teenagers or if they are adults or mixed groups, because then they get used to what is a very natural scenario in the world. Sorry, it took too long, but it's important.
No, that was great. Yeah, there's so many ideas.
Thank you.
That was great. A lot of ideas. And now here is a challenge for Delia. I love this question as I am one of these teachers right now. So this question came from Nick Gray, and it's for Delia. How would you recommend teachers adapt their materials for concurrent classes, online and in person at the same time, in comparison to hybrid classes, online one day, in person another?
Well, that sounds like quite a reasonable question, given that that's probably the experience of many teachers at the moment, teaching both of those kinds of classes. So I guess my recommendation really would be to try and identify what it is about using kind of in-person physical materials. What are the benefits of doing that, and what are the benefits of using online digital materials, and really make the most of those materials. So don't try and do something using digital that actually would be better in a face-to-face setting, and vice versa. And so some examples of that would be perhaps if you're looking at tasks that work better in in-person situations, would be things like collaborative tasks, tasks where you have collaborative speaking, for example. I mean, the last question was about how to get students speaking. Of course, we can do that online, but there are definitely benefits to doing it face-to-face, and I'm sure many teachers would agree with that. Other things like giving feedback, in-person feedback, lots of benefits to doing that in person as opposed to relying on technology. Technology can actually be quite limited in terms of what kind of feedback it can give to learners. It's usually kind of around the kind of automated corrective feedback type feedback they're getting. So they do need that personal human feedback as well. But then if we're looking at what are the benefits of digital learning, try and kind of focus your activities on things that maybe require learners to do repetitive practice activities, retrieval practice, spaced repetition, and so on. Lots of great tools and materials that allow for that, and a learner can do that at their own time, at their own pace. They can repeat tasks, not something that you can easily do with paper-based materials. So that's a great benefit of digital there. Other things like getting input via multimedia, so using videos and audio. Of course, there's a lot more you can do in terms of presenting new concepts and language using digital materials. So even in the classroom, you might maybe want to kind of focus on getting the input through videos and audio and so on. So yeah, that's really kind of try and identify what it is, what your objective is, and what are the best tools that are going to meet that objective. Yeah.
I saw that was your tip on the Instagram, on Cambridge's Instagram. I said, oh, that's so interesting. Because sometimes we just want to use things and we don't know why or for what we're using it. So that's really interesting. All right, shall we go to the live questions? We have some really good live questions, and now you guys can just give me an indication if you'd like to tackle this one, if you'd like to answer this one. So our first question is from Claudia Reis. I hope that's how you pronounce it. And she says, which strategies can you recommend to improve students' commitment to their own learning during online education? Hayo?
Oh, hi, did you want to go?
No, that's a very tough question. I'll gladly let you answer it, Delia.
It's quite a tough question. I mean, I think this is, again, something where we can start looking for what advantages does technology have for building these kind of learning strategies, which is all linked to learner autonomy, the building of learner autonomy. And actually, we were just talking a little bit earlier before we went live about the fact that some students have actually excelled and really felt more autonomous from being at home and going through online learning and home learning and so on. So things like the fact that they have their own time and their own space in which to work. So they're kind of managing their own time. They're managing their own learning setup and so on. So there's lots of tools, I think, that you can use to support that. Digital tools, digital diaries, apps that kind of give you reminders of when to return to studying, give you time limits as well. Often students can get kind of wrapped up in something and actually it's quite important to take a break as well. So things like that, this kind of time management, learning management tools. Raquel probably has some suggestions of which tools. I'm not off the top of my head. Would you recommend anything, Raquel, with those kind of tools?
From experience, that's very wise, Delia, what you were mentioning. We have to be careful because we are living through a moment where notifications pop up here and there. But what I like is specific follow-up activities for asynchronous learning. I plan a reminder if I'm using Classroom, for example. So for instance, if it's to be ready for Monday, so there's a reminder on Friday. I also like to sometimes send, it's like I sent a message and then I add a comment to it. And it's because it's so important to encourage each other. So sometimes a small video or a very short video, can just sparkle the curiosity. I think it's great that the students get to exchange ideas on how they are feeling before the class and how they plan to tackle that activity. And I think going like this, some sort of exercise, but blend some sort of research that can be done like in 2-3 minutes. Those are important techniques.
All great suggestions. I think, yeah, hey, Hayo, go ahead.
No, I really like those ideas from Delia and Raquel. And I think one technique that I've seen being used successfully, and I've tried it myself as well, is in terms of encouraging that learner agency and taking responsibility for their own learning, the planning and everything that goes with it, which we're sort of having, students to do at the moment for all sorts of obvious reasons, clearly is not, for some students, it's great and they run with it and they like that additional responsibility and perhaps freedom that comes with it. But obviously there's also going to be students for whom that's just very scary. And one way of kind of working with that is to have in your group smaller groups where learners maybe in groups of 3 or 4 or 5 are kind of responsible for managing their own learning and supporting each other. So for example, they could be doing a homework task, or they could be getting ready for next week's class, but they are supposed to be looking after each other, and they're supposed to maybe send each other some reminders or some positive comments or some feedback. And so it's a way of kind of creating continuous breakout rooms. And you could, of course, mix those groups as the semester, as the term goes along, so that different students work with other learners. But it just enables learners of different levels of competence to kind of feel a little bit more supported, even when you as a teacher can't continuously be there for them.
Excellent. And then I think this one is going to be for Hayo, because I saw his suggestion on Instagram, his tip. And so IELTS Cusco asked for suggestions for getting students to turn on their cameras.
Suggestions? Yeah. Well, I mean, this is one of the nice things about the whole digital teaching thing, is that you can kind of become someone else if you want. And with more and more tools making it easier to create interesting backgrounds and virtual backgrounds. And I find that, of course, depending on the age of your learners and so on, but that it can be a really a great way for learners to express their individuality and just to make the whole kind of online classroom a little bit less serious and a little bit less kind of static. So allowing them to maybe create their own and share their own virtual backgrounds, or even using avatars or cartoons or stickers or whatever is appropriate for the age group, I think really adds a little bit of levity to the environment. It can be a lot of fun.
Great. What about you, Raquel?
We have a hard time with teenage students because they just don't want to open the camera at all for a number of reasons. And now I'm in peace with that, but I think, especially when we have a new group and we don't actually know the students, so I have an agreement, it's been working. So they are just supposed to open the camera when they reply. I'm calling their names to check attendance, and then they open the camera and reply here and just quickly close that. So this is one way. With adults, it's easier, because they usually feel more comfortable when they go to breakout rooms. But this is something that has been working with teenagers. At least you know they are there, and you can have a quick glimpse at how they are feeling. It's something better than blank screen all the time. But I loved Hayo's suggestion, because I think it gives room to lots of things, and we can have a lot of fun. So I'm personally adopting that too.
Okay, we have another live question from Leila Naja. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it exactly, but she asks, how can we find the appropriate engaging digital materials? Delia?
I can have a bash at that one. Well, the first thing that's probably important is to get to know your students. So knowing your students is going to help you understand what is engaging for them. And obviously this is different depending on their age and their context and so on. So that's the first thing. We do have, so I think Kasia shared earlier in the digital day a set of guidelines or a checklist for how to kind of look for the right kind of materials and how to teach with digital materials. And in that we look at motivating learners. And so in that document, we identified some things that technology does really well to engage learners. And that could be things like getting learners to interact with the content. So interaction is really important for learners to feel like they're part of what they're learning, they're active, they're involved. And that might just be simple things as kind of moving things on the screen or clicking through and engaging with content in that way. That's something that you should really look out for in the materials. It allows learners to have some kind of interactivity with it, and also interactivity with each other. So creating a kind of collaborative environment keeping those social interactions, that's highly motivating for learners, and it needs to be kept up when their learning shifts online. And other things like make it enjoyable, make it fun, maybe add kind of gamification elements. You know, it doesn't have to be just for young learners. Adults enjoy being, you know, learning through games and gamification. And we can see that through the huge success of tools such as Duolingo and so on. So yeah, there's quite a lot that digital can do here to really make an engaging learning environment.
If I may add, just very briefly, I really, really like that, Delia, that one question. Do these materials, does this activity require my learners to do something? Is there some opportunity for them to not just sit and stare at a screen and listen to a teacher blab on, but is there some button they can press or comment they can type in or some response that they can give? And that's such a simple but effective question to ask when evaluating what sorts of materials to use. We know so well lecture style presentations don't really work in a face-to-face classroom, and they're even worse online because you're not even surrounded by other human beings. You're just staring at this monitor. So that's such a nice, simple way of making sure that what you do is at least interactive. So great idea.
So we all as teachers have had different experiences through this period of teaching online. And throughout the day, Cambridge has been posting some polls on digital learning and digital teaching. So we're going to take a look now at one of the results, and I want your feedback, your thoughts on these results. So the question was, how do you feel about teaching with digital tools? So 40% says they feel excited, 30% says they feel confident, 19% say they feel worried, and 11% say they feel confused. So what are your thoughts on this result?
I think I'm going to answer that first. I see the excitement in the very beginning when the schools were shut down and everybody's like, oh my God, there are so many possibilities. But what caught my attention is like, I get worried too. So we've got like, the numbers are not really so different, which shows that we teachers have been going through ups and downs of feeling motivated, but then tired. Once you get to understand the, let's say, the mechanics of the platform, so you feel confident, but you also worry, especially when it comes to teaching a foreign language, how it is that I'm going to bridge this gap so that my students are going to communicate and have these moments of interacting with each other and communicating, because that's the whole purpose of attending English courses and becoming more fluent in a foreign language. So I find it interesting. It gives us important information to take a look at.
I think it'd be interesting to see how different the results would have been at the beginning of the year compared to now. I wonder if perhaps there weren't quite as many people who felt excited at that point, but it's great actually, because it means that teachers are growing in confidence with using digital technologies. They're seeing the benefits of it for their learners, and they're getting more comfortable with it. So I think that's a super outcome, at least, of something that's not been great this year.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I mean, these polls are absolutely fascinating, and it's quite a good number, but I'm just wondering if the option existed in the poll, whether most teachers, I certainly would have myself, I would have selected, I am both excited and confused and worried and confident, usually all at the same time, multiple times during the day. But I think the nice thing about that is that we're never going to grow as teachers without some degree of, challenge, without some struggle. And well, we certainly have plenty of struggle this year, but let's recognize and remember that it's through the struggle that we come out the other end better, stronger, more confident, and better able to support our learners. So there's that.
That's great. I thought the same thing as Delia. I would have liked to seen this poll in the beginning, because I think we all in the beginning were kind of caught off guard. Not Hayo, because he said he's been teaching online since 1997. I was so jealous. but it's good that teachers have grown from this experience, right? That's really good. So I have one last question, and I would like all of you to give your ideas on it. And this is kind of a way we can help teachers continuing their development, right? So the question is, the pandemic has accelerated the move to digital and blended education. What long-term impacts, positive or negative, do you think we're going to see following the current changes in teaching and learning? Who'd like to go first?
Well, I can go first. So I'd like to kind of focus on the positives more than the negatives. I think it's a positive thing in the sense that we are going to be seeing more innovation from tech companies, from publishers, from people creating the materials. There's going to be more a better understanding of how learners learn in a digital environment and how teachers have what kind of preferences they have in terms of how they use the materials and so on. So we're getting a lot of information back, valuable information about what's going on in the classroom or virtual classroom, and therefore what kind of tools are going to best meet those needs. So I'm kind of looking forward to what's coming in the future, developments around artificial intelligence as well, improvements in the way we give feedback and score feedback and on things like speaking, which at the moment perhaps we haven't really come very far with in the technology. Obviously there are some drawbacks, and perhaps one of the negatives is that we'll have just this even bigger amount of products out there that we have to wade through in order to find the best ones. But I feel like teachers and learners are better equipped to know what it is they want and what's going to be the best for them. So that's another positive as well.
Well, what I see is that we teachers, we have overcome a barrier, something that is a limiting belief that some of us would be tech savvy, whereas others wouldn't be. And somehow there would be these teachers who are great using technology and those teachers who don't learn. And sometimes things were so strong that some of us would really think this way. And now this barrier is in a way over, because regardless of the training, we have adjusted and we have overcome these obstacles. So this is great. I believe that the development of tools will think a lot more as how to maximize the human interaction rather than click here, click there, light here, you know, and the integration through the platforms for synchronous teaching especially. I see that parents are also more involved in the education of their children, even if from far away, supporting the teachers. And I think that what should be taken into consideration is the processes for us teachers, because, you know, we have made this huge effort to catch up with the demands, to cater for not only the classes, but the emotional needs of our students. So it's important that somehow this gets to us too. I would like to say that I'm really, really proud of all of us. And we should, each one of us, feel proud of how far along we have come and of our students, because they help each other. I've seen my learners helping each other attend the class by using another platform, so the colleague can also take part, and we teachers and our families. So I think, like Delia said, I try and I make an effort to look at the positives, and then with that comes wisdom, and it helps us deal with the negative points and to get to understand what stays and what is a passing fad. And I think this is necessary too.
Well, I don't know if I have much to add to that because I totally agree. And I think one of the positives of the whole situation is that it's leveled the playing field when we're all in this together, and we all have to figure out how to suddenly change things. And like Raquel said, I'm also very proud of all the teachers who I've met who've taken on that challenge. And I think, you know, forget about the technology for a moment. I think one of the positive outcomes will be that we can all feel a sense of confidence and achievement for having stepped up and having gone through this. And as I said earlier, there is no transformation without some level of pain, without some sort of struggle. And we've all struggled enough. So there's going to be some sort of transformation. And I think at the end, our education system and we as teachers and our learners as a result, most importantly, will be a little bit better off, at least than before. So I too am actually quite optimistic and hopeful for the future. Not every day though.
We're only human, right? So I would like to thank our three experts for this fantastic Q&A. I'm sure our viewers were inspired and enlightened by your wonderful ideas. And also thank our audience for submitting your questions and being with us today. And before we go, I invite you to check out our Digital Day social content with tips from our experts, short videos about digital learning, a checklist for teaching with tech, which by the way is really helpful. And don't forget to download our Digital Day filter on Instagram, so you can share a picture on your stories and say you were part of this wonderful day. And if you don't follow us yet, we are at Cambridge UP, University Press, Cambridge UP, ELT. You can follow the profile there, and there are lots of tips to help you teach with digital. And thank you so much, all of you three, for being with us, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.